super ego went out drinking.
Hey everybody, this is Steve Junior with Seth, and we're with the Design Edge podcast, and welcome back. For those of you that have listened, for those of you that haven't, sometimes we'll invite a guest on, and sometimes we'll talk about a particular tool or methodology or process or framework, blah, 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 that we really like to use in our work. And today we're going to talk about one of my favorite all-time tools that Alex Osterwalder and team was actually kind of crowdsourced, created, and it's called the Business Model Canvas. I was lucky enough about 5 or 6 years ago to help program manage one of Humana's flagship leadership development programs called Healthcare Leaders 2020, where the goal was to try to shape C-suite leaders by the year 2020. And I had an opportunity to go and be taught Business Model Canvas by Alex. And in his introduction, what he talked to the entire group about was, there was no real good meta analysis or thorough understanding of the value of business strategy. A lot of times you'll hear, once the strategy document is printed, it's pretty much dead. It's out of date as soon as it comes off the printer. And I tend to agree with that. I think that's it's one of those things where I've been part of enough strategy sessions to realize that a 70-page PowerPoint deck just really is, A, it's almost too much, and B, the environment, the technology, everything that surrounds our businesses this day, especially with the consumer is shifting so quickly, it's hard for a 70-point PowerPoint to kind of keep up to date and fresh. And so what Alex did is he did this meta-analysis of business strategy, and he boiled it down to a single page. And it was the most amazing thing that I've seen, and probably throughout my MBA, throughout my work in business, just to clearly articulate in one page how a business model operates. And I think that's the key, is because if you're developing a new product or service, you want to be able to better understand what the value prop is, who your customer segments, start thinking about your revenue and expenses, and all in one page. This really gives you a great idea and sense for everything you need to know about a specific business model for a new or even a revised product or service. And so I love it. And I think it's one of the greatest tools that entrepreneurs and innovators and people in the consumer experience world can use. So one of the things that we want to talk about, and I remember this still to this day, is after I took the class with Alex and a bunch of other really, really smart people that were way ahead of the curve on me in terms of consumer experience and innovation, I remember using it as part of the Healthcare Leaders 2020 program, because we were doing some work at Humana called Bold Goal. And in the show notes, I'll have Seth publish a link to the Bold Goal report, because the whole intent of that effort was around population health and helping the communities that Humana served improve their health by 20% by 2020. And so many of you are saying, well, what does that mean, Steve? How are you going to improve health by 20%? Or how is Humana really? And really, they used a great measure that's been around since the 70s that the CDC, the Center for Disease Control, created, called Healthy Days. And it essentially asks a couple questions. It asks, how many days this month were you physically not able to do what you want to do? And how many days mentally were you not able to do what you want to do? Sometimes there's a third question, if I can't recall it off the top of my head. But in any case, we were doing before measures, and then we were working with other community organizations, nonprofits, state government, other corporations to really have an impact on the community. And I remember that going to San Antonio, we were looking at, what was our product and service mix? How could we potentially have an impact on the community and as a business, because a business does need to be profitable to continue to serve their constituents, their stakeholders, and their members. What does that business model look like? And I can't get into too many specifics, but one example was, around telehealth, if I recall from one of our executives. And so one of the things that we did with Business Model Canvas is we laid out the business model, which again, it includes what customer segments are we going to use it with? Is it going to be Medicare, group, Medicaid? Is it going to be self-insured at that time? Who's it really for? And we took a look at telehealth and put it through the lens of the Business Model Canvas to really determine if there was enough of a value proposition in a business case to be able to justify the costs and all the resources that were required. So that was one example of using business model Canvas. And it's been a while. It's been, oh my gosh, maybe 4 or 5 or more years since we've done that one. So details are a little fuzzy. So forgive me if you worked on that project with me. But it was a great way to really kind of build that case. Most recently, we've had another client, and they've been focusing on kind of pediatric, an aspect of children's healthcare, and we'll leave it like that at a very high level. And one of the things that we were doing is we were looking at providing new services to be able to get better pediatric rates of adherence on a specific aspect of health. And so what we had is and I talked about this in a previous podcast, is we had 5 prototypes, and just an update if we forgot to tell you, but 4 of those prototypes actually got funded, and they're moving forward, and they're being implemented in the next 90 to 100 days, which is really exciting. And as part of that implementation, we had to create a business case for each one, because, like I said, most organizations are not in the business to necessarily lose money, especially in healthcare. We're there to try to help improve healthcare and be able to, through a business model, Canvas, for example, demonstrate value not only to the customer but to the organization. So in this one, we looked at a new potential service that we were going to offer to try to increase engagement or use of this pediatric service to get numbers higher. And so we went through and we said, okay, what's really our customer segment? Because it could be 0 to 2-year-olds, it could be, 3 to 15, it could be, up to 21 in the case of Medicaid. And so we really had to define, what was the target in terms of the customer segment. And then in some cases, there was more than one. What I loved about what I learned, and again, I probably need to be updated and learn a little bit more about this as well. But for each customer segment, there could be a unique value proposition for each one. So if I'm a parent, which is a customer segment, if I've got children, there's a value prop for doing these preventive screenings that is different than if I'm a child that is 2 years old and I'm afraid of these preventive screenings, right? So with each customer segment, there has to be unique value prop, and then you have to decide what kind of customer relationship do I want to have with each of these customer segments? Is it all about acquisition? Is it about retaining? There's so many different things. And by the way, in the show notes, Seth will have to publish there's a couple of videos that are great at explaining the business model Canvas. So after I think about what really is going to be the foundation for the customer relationship, then I move down and talk about the distribution channel. So if I've got this customer segment, and I've got this new product or service that has this a value proposition that's really enticing and makes the consumer want to, quote, buy into it, how am I going to deliver that value? And that's really through the distribution channel. And again, each one of these 4 prototypes that we developed, we created this business model Canvas. And they had to explain how they were going to deliver that value for their specific customer segments, whether that be through partnerships with nonprofits, schools, corporations, whether that be through existing channels that they already have, or whether they have to build new channels and new partnerships and relationships. In any case, had the goal with these, if we increase adherence, is that there's an impact financially. The right side of the business model Canvas is really kind of the plus side, is what I call it, if you think about a balance sheet and so forth, because you're looking at the things that are going to add value not only to your consumer, but that are going to generate revenue for your organization. When you look at the left side, which is what we're going to shift to next, it's really about what are the key resources and activities that I have to do to deliver that value prop to those consumers. So I'm literally going to map out what are the resources I need, whether they be human resources, whether it be technology resources. If it's a resource, I need to put that in there and account for it. And what are the key activities that I need to do? Do I need to create a new packaging to deliver this amazing new innovation or new product to a parent who has a child that's 0 to 2, that I want them to be more adherent in some of their checkups. List out all those key activities, because eventually, in a second, we'll talk about it, those are going to drive costs. The key resources are going to drive costs. On the far left of the business model canvas, you also have key partnerships, which again can also, in some cases, they'll be internal, so they won't necessarily drive costs, although there might be some internal accounting things that you do. But key partnerships could also include external organizations, where, for example, let's say I've had a lot of experience with remote area medical, and they have vans. Let's say it's for vision. They have semis and vans where you can not only get your vision checked, but you can also get your glasses made that same day. And they have a really unique model. But let's say we wanted to work with them on this particular aspect. Well, remote area medical, even though they're a nonprofit, it's not for free. So what I would want to do is I would want to go ahead and maybe create a partnership with them, which would result in a donation to them for their services. So again, even though I have key partnerships, I think of them as internal and external. There could potentially be costs associated with them, along with the costs associated with key resources and activities. And all those go in the bottom that really outline our costs. So my favorite cliche is, at the end of the day, I've laid out basically my entire business model, including my estimates upon revenue, as well as cost, on a single page. And that's the beauty of the business model canvas, is that you can take that single page and sit down with your executives and walk them through exactly the kind of impact this is going to have. A lot of times also we'll use the business model canvas as the basis to develop, and most organizations are going to want something a little bit more specific in terms of numbers and background data. So it'll be the foundation of the business case, so to speak. So one of the things that I've mentioned is, that the business model canvas for me is really the foundation of the business case. It truly is. And you're always going to have a chief financial officer or someone that's responsible that in your organization that's really going to want probably a higher level of affinity in terms of the numbers, right? Just because I put revenue and I put costs down, if I say it's going to have a positive impact, it's going to drive utilization management X%, which is probably going to have us make some increased investments potentially in care managers and tools and systems. They're going to want probably some more detailed information in terms of, if we pull this lever in terms of a new product or service, and we anticipate a specific kind of value in terms of revenue. And you don't have to necessarily, it doesn't necessarily have to be hard revenue, but in a lot of cases, you want to be able to talk about how it's going to be able to impact revenue in healthcare. That's pretty easy because it's around engagement, utilization of services, blah, blah, blah. In any case, a lot of times you're going to have to take the foundation of the business model canvas and translate that into your organization's business case. So that might say, in this case, let's say we get a 3% uptick in terms of pediatric screenings for this particular aspect in healthcare. Well, a 3% uptick means that our bonus from a HEDIS perspective, hitting those HEDIS measures, is going to be significantly higher in some cases. So again, I don't have the numbers in front of me, but you get the idea, right? And so if we're going to project that those numbers are going to be significantly higher, we really want to validate that. And the business model canvas is not necessarily for nuts and bolts. It's really to lay out medium level detail. When you go to do your business case, you're going to get into finite detail. For every % that we increase HEDIS scores, here's the impact on our year-end bonus. For every increase in terms of getting people who have diabetes, getting their feet checked, getting their eyes checked, we anticipate better health outcomes in terms of why. So how does that help? Because there's also a cost for that kind of quote compliance or adherence, I guess is a better word. I don't like the word compliance, but adherence. And so, you really need to take the business model canvas as the foundation, and then you take it and you turn it into more of a business case that really suits your organization. Because most organizations already have a process in place where, you really do have to justify the numbers and the overall case for rolling out a new product or service. Okay, all right. So, I've been babbling on here quite a bit about business model canvas, and I apologize. I'm sure I said something incorrectly. Hopefully it's only like one thing and it was minor. There are some great resources, like I said, that we'll put out there. I mean, there's a guy that uses Business Model Canvas to test hypothesis. He uses it really as, I want to say his name is Steve, but I'll have to pull that from the show notes and maybe share another video out there. But he's a fantastic mind around Business Model Canvas and does a lot of partnership with Alex and that team. So I'll try to find that information for everyone too. But now I want to turn the tables on Seth a little bit, because it's a little bit outside of healthcare and I don't want to go into too many specifics. But Seth, you had an idea for a business that you wanted to start. He's kind of an entrepreneurial kind of young adult. And so, we walked through the Business Model Canvas, and I'd like to get your impression of what it was like to really have to think through each of those elements of the Business Model Canvas. What was the first thought that you had as we started walking through it, and more importantly, as we finished the first draft?
So my first thought when we were walking through all this stuff was that I had seen this only one other time before, and in the Innovation Center where I worked in college, we had a huge, probably 15 feet by 30 feet, something ridiculous like that, or like 15 by 15 feet. I don't know.
Yeah, like the vinyl Business Model Canvas. That's the one you're talking about, right?
Yep, and I had really never heard anything about it except that it was a tool for problem solving, and it looked really nice. So that was my first impression of it. And then when you dive deeper into it, and before we even met to talk about my actual Business Model Canvas, I dug out one of my old books about it that I didn't realize I had. And when I started to go deeper into that, I was able to make a framework based on what they were giving me advice about, and then what I saw for my future. And when I first started trying to apply it to what I actually wanted to do, it was it's very easy to jump.
Yeah, and I don't mean to interrupt, and I want to emphasize something that you said. I typically try to have people on the first iteration start on the right side of the canvas with your customer segments. You jump to value prop, customer relationship, and then distribution channel. As you go through this, the reason I like to start at the right, I can't remember the exact reason Alex told us in class. I just think it forces you to think differently, because if you have multiple customer segments, it makes sense that you'd have a unique value prop. However, as you get into iteration 2, 3, all the way up through 40 or 50, I know I've worked with people that have gone that high in terms of their iteration, because every time you learn something about your product or service, you should go back to your Business Model Canvas and make a change or an addition or remove something. And you're right, you can start popping around. Your brain will start activating, and you'll say, oh, wow, I think this is a great distribution channel that we buy an RV and we outfit it with a vision center. Well, hell, there's a lot of activities and costs associated with that, and it might be easier, instead of buying an RV on your own, which is upwards of 6 figures and beyond, and you got to think about HIPAA and all this other sort of fun stuff, is you might want to find a key partner. Okay, so I find a key partner. What are the activities and costs associated with that? So you're right, and I just want to highlight that your brain will start thinking about all the things that you have to do. And it's just it's a roadmap. It's a roadmap to the business model and all the things that make up this product or service. So I just wanted to emphasize that. I thought that was a really astute point on your part.
Well, thank you. And then one thing that I wanted to bring up too while you're talking about that stuff is it's sort of going from right to left is more, I want to say, unselfish, because you're not starting with your idea. You're not starting with how much revenue you think you can bring in, or it's not about money at that point. It's about first and foremost, who are you going to reach, and then how are you going to reach them, and then what are you going to give them. I like that a lot better than saying, this is what I'm going to give you, this is who I'm going to ask about it, and then this is how much I'm going to make from it.
Yeah, so it almost kind of has that virtuousness behind it. Is that what you're saying?
Sort of, yeah. It makes it easier to be realistic instead of reaching way too far. It's good to reach far because you can with this tool, but it really hones it down.
Also, again, one question I have for you, Seth, I lied to people. I don't know if the audio cut out, but in the original audio, I said, it could take a lot of time to do this, but I'm a liar, because how long did it take time down to really get a good 50 to 60% complete business model for what we were thinking about at that time. Do you remember?
Really, it took us for the first time to put one together with me and you. It was more along the lines of 5 to 10 minutes of straight work, and then just babbling after that.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, the beauty in terms of following this business model canvas, which I call a roadmap to your business model, is that it doesn't take very long at all. I mean, once you understand each of the elements, and Seth came up with a really nice cheat sheet that I wanted to add to the show notes because it kind of explains each box within the business model canvas in a way that I haven't been able to articulate. So, Seth, good on you for that, but I want to put that out there. Yeah, we talked for about 45 minutes, but it was really 10 to 15 minutes from my recollection of getting that out there and being better than 50% complete. Now, the thing is, your ideas, for most entrepreneurs, your ideas evolve over time. And as your ideas evolve, what you put in the business model canvas should also evolve. So what else comes to top of mind, Seth, when you think about the business model canvas for your business? What are the things as a result of filling out that canvas the first time? What kind of impact has it had on you?
It's really one of those tangible things that you can hang up or look at and see it and be like, oh, shoot, I'm not doing work. Oh, shoot, I got to start doing this again. It's a constant reminder of sort of your goal or your mission, and as well as what are your next steps, and basically a checklist if you're lost. If you ever forget something, this is where I can go, or this is what I need to do, or this is what I'm working towards, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes total sense. One of the things I failed to mention earlier is a lot of times before I ever get into, it doesn't always happen like this. My preference is before you get into doing your project planning, program management, thinking through everything, do your business model canvas first, because it lays out many of the major elements that you would put into a program or a project management plan. And of course, we advocate for 2-week cycles of learning. So it's an iteration. We go out, we take out the new product or service to the field, we test it, we learn, we make iterations, and we keep doing that through various cycles. The business model canvas is a great way to launch into your formal kind of planning and even informal planning. A lot of times when we come out of a design workshop, and I had the opportunity to work with Nason Group recently, great group of people led by Sean Nason. You got Michael Harper, Travis, you've got Ryan, and you've got just Mark McFerrin, just a number of brilliant people that are in the design field. And, coming out of that particular design sprint, we were building 30, 60, 90-day plans. That business model canvas can have a big impact in terms of how you think about the scope of that, delivering something in 90 days. Because a lot of times you might have this very beautiful, big idea, and sometimes you might have to de-scope. And I've done that with one of our recent clients, Seth, that you've been working with me on, is we've had to say, you know what, this is great in its entirety. However, we want to get a reaction to a specific element of this new product or service. So let's focus on this part being implemented within 90 days, which is to this particular customer segment that drives this value prop, and we believe will drive this kind of revenue in terms of financials. I mean, does that resonate with you at all in terms of what you just said? Because I think you said something very similar, that it was a good way for you to track, like, hey, have I got anything done? And if I haven't, where do I start?
Correct. Yes, it does resonate with me. And then the other thing about it is I recently read for the first time about innovation accounting. And
Ooh,
one of the components to that was more along the lines of learning progress. And I think that's a thing that the business model canvas inadvertently takes into account.
wow. I've heard of some things around innovation, but not innovation accounting. I guess that's what I was trying to say. I've not heard of innovation accounting. And that's really interesting. We may have to have you come on and do a quick 10, 15-minute discussion on that as well. We've obviously done a lot around how do you measure innovation and so forth, but I'm intrigued by what you said there. What other value do you think others would get out of the business model canvas in addition to what you've seen for yourself and with some of our clients?
Um, that largely, I think, well, first I need to say that legitimately you need to read the book for yourself, The Business Model Generation, not just follow along on my cheat sheet or somebody else's cheat sheet or someone else's video, because the book is truly it's a piece of design as well. And I think they probably even use the business model canvas in order to create that book. And then the other thing I would say is, in order to use this, I still struggle with sometimes the value prop. And recently, when we were working together, we had to go into sort of a deep dive, and I had to reformat a template for the value proposition. And it's something that makes sense, but it doesn't. And it turns out, I think a few, or one of the people that was in the call at the time struggled with it, but by the end of the call, I don't know exactly what made it click for them, but it did click. Do you remember it all, Steve?
Yeah, it's I remember that call. And value prop is tough because there's actually a separate value proposition canvas that helps you really determine what goes into the value prop. And we like to try to constrain it to about 15 words or less. But it talks about the products and services, the job of the customer, the pains and gains. And so it's really something like you said. And by the way, everyone struggles with at least one element of the business model canvas. I always struggle with customer segment. No, customer relationship. Customer segment I'm good in. Customer relationships, and like you said, you got to get the book, The Business Model Generation, because it goes into a whole level of depth that we can't cover in this podcast, and it's written by experts. I'd say we're pretty good at what we do, and I love Business Model Canvas, but every time I teach it, or every time I'm filling one out, I pull up the book and I look at customer relationship because it just does not sink in and resonate with me in a way that I can remember. But in any case, I remember being on that call and we were walking through because there's a specific formula for deriving your value proposition. And that's what the value proposition canvas does. And I think someone had said, because you're looking for specific verbs, and it's kind of diametrically opposed. So you're looking for decreases in reducing pain in some ways and increases and gains in others. And I think when they got to that point, they really, something just really clicked. And honestly, I wish I could tell you, but I think it was actually a comment from someone else. And the fact that we were using a screen so that everybody could see what we were talking about. Please, people, we use Zoom, but we don't publish the video to YouTube. We just pull the audio. Use WebEx, use Zoom, use GoToMeeting, whatever the tools are out today. There's a million of them, right? But have that shared space where people can see what you're doing in terms of creating the business model canvas and in terms of creating the value prop. Having that shared space will allow all of you to kind of see it, feel it, and have a perspective, an informed perspective. Well, Seth, thanks for sharing kind of your experience and what you've learned about business model canvas. Is there any other advice that you'd have out there for any of our listeners?
My first piece of advice is, I wanted to say two different things, so I'll go with the first one that popped into my head, is that there's a follow-up to this business model canvas, and it's the personal business model canvas, whatever, the follow-up to it, the personal canvas.
Oh yeah, it's called Business Model You. I completely forgot about that, but yeah, it's about you and your career. So is that the one you're talking about?
Yes, and you mentioned at the start, I have this sort of entrepreneurial spirit. That's true, and I think it largely can be explained through this next tool, and that helped me to eventually actually create the business model canvas in 5 to 10 minutes, and in that short amount of time, is because I understood myself and what value that I actually brought to my own entrepreneurship. And I felt like that is something that you need to do first if you're starting out. And then you can go on to the projects that you want to start doing. Because I don't think a lot of people understand themselves right now, because we spend all this time, especially with schools and stuff, and even the entrepreneurial programs that I know about at my school, we spend so much time talking about what are we going to deliver instead of who we are as an individual.
I think that's a really profound statement there because, Business Model You really does look at you and takes you through a process similar to Business Model Canvas and really helps you kind of, I know it sounds kind of corny, but I'm okay with it. I'm the king of corny. It really helps you define yourself. Is that a fair statement, or how would you describe it, Seth?
That's the perfect way to put it in like 5 words.
Well, yeah, and you surprised me with that one. I didn't expect you to say Business Model You because I honestly looked at it, but I have looked at it as well and used it in my career. That's the time that I pulled on that and for some long-term kind of visioning. What was the second thing that popped into your mind?
The second thing that sort of popped into my mind was is that this whole process can be frustrating, and there's lulls, especially as you're starting your own business. You probably already know about that. But actually doing this and not halfway doing it, doing the whole thing, putting in a lot of effort into it, even testing it, getting feedback and iterating on it, the old design principles, those really go into effect with the business model canvas. I remember after our first one, I immediately took my purple pen to it and then drew some of the diagrams that I use, and then had some of the other tools in specific boxes for the business model canvas, and I integrated those. That was my first iteration, and then my third iteration was me presenting it to you and getting feedback through that, and really going through that whole loop. I think is something that you need to consider, and not just permanently display it after one session.
Yeah, I think that's good advice too. It's a constant work in progress. I suppose when you launch your product or service, it's pretty solid at that point. And as soon as you launch it publicly beyond consumers that you're testing with, you're obviously going to get feedback, and you probably should go back to it and continue to adjust it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, I think this is a great topic, Seth. I know you wanted us to spend a little bit of time talking to folks about one of my favorite tools, and I think it's one of yours as well, about business model canvas and the great things that you can do with it as you think about, your consumers and innovation. And I hope people out there take a minute to just take a look at least at the show notes, check out the videos that Seth will point you to, and really think about incorporating this as part of your innovation practice or your consumer experience practice. All of us who have worked in this for a while know that there's someone there that has the checkbook. And if they're really good at their job, they're not going to write out the check just because you think you have a good idea. They're going to write out the check because they think you not only have a good idea, but that it's going to have a significant impact on your population, whether it be patients, if you're in if you're in a hospital system, or practice, have your own practice, or a member if you're in the insurance company side of the house. And so, it's really incumbent upon us as innovators not just to have great ideas, but to back them up with a great business model and justification. So hopefully you find this useful. Seth, is there anything else you'd like to add before we sign off?
No, good to be here again.
Yeah, great to be here as well. Thank you so much, Seth, for setting this up and getting this out. And we hope that you guys enjoyed this episode of the Design Edge, and keep on designing for those consumers because they need you. And we wish you the best of luck.
Scientifically speaking, mankind's social